Aloha Exiles, in honor of Animate Weapon becoming somewhat viable by GGG allowing us to animate blades from Blade Fall and Blade Vortex, I decided to try my hand at making a Chains of Command Animate Weapon build and learn all I could in case I decide to league start with it for Delirium. I'm going to go over gear, passives, and all the cheeky mechanics I abused to make it work. This is one of my more convoluted builds, so buckle in. This build centers around the Chains of Command because without it, Animate Weapon is a dead skill that can't do content without dropping an inventory of weapons. This armor generates weapons whenever our Guardian kills an enemy, or 10% of the time when our weapons kill enemies. These animated weapons are always the weapon our Guardian is carrying, essentially duping a weapon's stats to a minion that hits with it. This chest also gives our animated minions splash, which solves a link for clearing maps. You never have to gem swap to make it work. Because of this skill being granted by the chest, it can be effectively a 7-link with no links just by socketing the necessary supports. To generate weapons out of the thin air, we use the almighty Writhing Jar flask. Writhing Jar pops out 2 worms on use, which are enemies that can be killed by our Guardian to generate a weapon. We of course use 5 of these jars to generate as many weapons as possible. I'm going to move on to other gear pieces and go into depth on weapon generation later. Next up, rings and amulets are just rares with life and resistances. Only one ring needs to be unset to make our sockets work. I previously, on an earlier version of the build, needed 2 unsets but improved it and never updated my rings because I'm lazy. On an amulet, we also want to allocate the node Grave Pact. It's probably one of the biggest damage nodes for minions on the tree. For our wand, we're looking at simply buying a wand within the incursion mod, minion damage, and an open suffix to craft trigger socketed spell when you use a skill. Ignore the fact I crafted on Aspect of the Avian. This is before I remembered that I'm weapon swapping on a regular basis, and then that would make Aspect of the Avian on reserve every time I weapon swapped. Now for the convoluted strats. Our shield involves Abusive Necromantic Aegis Keystone. We use a Light of Lunaris to give our minions 58 crit multi, and we have a weapon swap every 10 seconds to our minimum Frenzy and Power Charge shield. This basically is a way of getting our minions the benefit of Frenzy and Power Charge generation, while also giving them crit multi from another shield, effectively giving them the benefit of 2 shields. This will probably be patched. Abuse it while you still can, my friends. Next on the list is the boots. The Stampede is the boot of choice. We use these because we have no flash space for Quicksilver, so they have a decent amount of move speed on them. And on top of that, we can get more cooldown recovery on our movement speeds. And we also get to allocate another node, which is important, so we can allocate Arcane Chemistry. This node is the only node on the tree that grants reduced flash charges used. It's 15%, which brings us to our belt, which we grab life and resistances, plus the tier 1 reduced flash charge used mod. Between Arcane Chem and our belt reduced mod, we can get our Writhing Jars down to consume only 10 charges per use. To hit the 10 charge cost, the belt needs to at least roll 17% reduced flash charges used. With that, the Writhing Jar has to be perfect. From there, the rule of thumb is the sum has to be at least 37% reduced between the 2 rolls. So you'll see in this chart, it goes 17-20, 18-19, 19-18. More or less, the higher you can get your belt roll, the easier it is going to be to buy 5 Writhing Jars with a roll that actually works to get to 10 charges used. Next up is our helmet. We use the Eye of Malice. For the key mod, nearby enemies have 50% increased fire resistance. Our minions deal almost pure fire damage, and this mod sounds bad, but it mechanically can be quite strong for our build. This mod serves as a 1.5 multiplier regardless of whether resistance is positive or negative. We capitalize on this by brutalizing the enemy's resistance with dual curse flammability and elemental weakness, along with fire exposure, combustion support, and elemental equilibrium. We'll use the Shaper as an example, as he is the gold standard in PoB. Calculations are as follows. Shaper starts at 50 resistances. We subtract 50 for elemental equilibrium, 25 for fire exposure, 19 for combustion, 20 if you can get it to level 21, and another 89 from our 2 curses, which we have 20% increased curse effect, so we multiply it by a factor of 1.2, and then Shaper is a boss with 60% less curse effect, so we multiply it by 0.4. Together, these things come out to negative 86.72, which gets multiplied by 1.5, making the final result is Shaper will have negative 130 resistance to fire, which is huge. If we're hitting him with fire damage, it's effectively doubling the damage, more or less, and a little bit more, honestly. Last gear slot we use is Triad Grip to convert 100% of the minion physical damage to fire damage as we give our minions a physical weapon. Now we move on to our Animate Guardians gear. To start off, we give our Guardian Hands of the High Templar for increased life and some resistances. For the boots, doesn't really matter too much, but I'd recommend some boots with the Regen enchant if you've been hit recently. After that, ideally a chest with Regen 3% life every 15 seconds, or Consecrated Groundwind Stationary mod. I think that's either a Hunter mod or a Crusader mod. And then we want to be able to craft a prefix with the gain 10% of life as Energy Shield craft. This, plus Grave Attention's Notable on the Tree, gives our Guardian 20% of his life as Energy Shield, which combos quite nicely with the Helmet the Mask of the Stitch Demon, which gives 1% regen per 500 Energy Shield. So pretty much, say we have a Guardian with 50,000 life, 10,000 ES is gained as extra, and then from that, the Mask of the Stitch Demon gives the Guardian 20% regen per second, which is huge. And that's just a guesstimate number. The Guardian's life is actually higher, and it's more regen than even that. This helps him sustain Infernal Legion. Lastly, Animate Guardian weapon is a 500 PDPS axe with a high crit chance, some extra crit multi, and an open prefix. With the open prefix, I crafted Hits Can't Be Evaded, which turned my 70C axe into a 70C axe plus a 3x craft, because Hits Can't Be Evaded is a 3x craft apparently. This is kind of pricey. Honestly, I'd recommend either giving your Guardian a Kingmaker or an Uro's Sacrifice if you can't afford making that kind of craft. In which case, you want to swap out your Light of Lunaris for a Lycosidae shield to make sure our minions are always hitting. Also, if you use an Uro's Sacrifice, you can swap the gloves for something with life and resistances or something else of your choosing, because at that point you don't need to convert a bunch of physical damage to fire damage. I'm going to head in game to explain the passives along with some gem links and additional miscellaneous things to know when playing the build. Here we are in game, and I'm going to go over gems, links, and the passive tree and a few other miscellaneous things. So, looking at the links in the chest, because the chest has the skill is part of the chest, you don't need to link anything. You literally just need 6 sockets, and all of these are directly linked to the skill given to you by the chest. So, we have multi-strike, combustion, elemental damage with attacks, awakened minion damage, deathmark support, and awaken. You know what I just realized? I just realized I'm stupid because enemies ignited by supported skills have -5. So when I was putting in links, I arbitrarily decided that I was going to throw an early focus because ignite it doesn't help our damage at all. But then I just realized now that I'm retarded, and I just bricked my phone call. Well, my sister called me right in the middle of that explanation, but more or less, don't use LE Focus. I would use Elemental Army or Ruthless. Probably Ruthless would be more damage instead of Elemental Focus, because Elemental Focus would ruin Combustion support, -19 resistance. Next up, we're going to look at our Orb of Storms Curse on Hit setup. We have Orb of Sterns with Flammability and Elemental Weakness being cursed with Curse on Hit. The quality on Curse on Hit is important for an extra 10% increased effect of the curses. So basically you're going into a boss fight, they're like doing their dialogue or whatever, you just drop one of these bad boys and it is going to apply EE and the 2 curses on them. Next up, we have the spells that are in our trigger when you use a skill wand. So first of all, we have Immortal Call, Desecrate, and Spirit Offering. You'll see whenever I Flame Dash around, it uses one of these skills. So you'll see there's my Spirit Offering. It'll be triggering whenever I'm doing stuff, you know, constantly giving that. Also, you'll see, I guess, Immortal Call's on cooldown, so, okay, there it goes off. Basically, it's just to... There's a lot of skills I have to use in this build, and I don't want to be a spin-to-win loser, so I am choosing to use it via the triggering the spells. Somebody's buying a Brutal Restraint. Funny story is, I bought like 12 Brutal Restraints thinking that reduced flash charges was a mod on Brutal Restraints, but it's not. So yeah, that was just stupid of me. Next up on the gear, we have our triad grips. In it, we have anger linked to generosity, along with a portal gem and flesh and stone. We use flesh and stone because we need another red gem, and it's nice to blind all the enemies around me, so that way they're less likely to hit me. It's a nice little defensive boost. In our boots, the Stampede, we have our Animate Guardian linked to Empower, Minion Life. This is basically all just to get his minion life as high as possible. And lastly, Infernal Legion. The reason for this, the reason for having it linked to Infernal Legion is so that when I pop these worms, the Guardian's kind of stupid. He's bad at going around hitting things. The Infernal Legion will basically kill the worms really quickly. You'll see how, he doesn't even react, but he still gets the kill because of Infernal Legion. If I didn't have that, the animated weapons more than likely would get a lot of the kills. You'll see they're swinging at it and they're fighting for it, but the Infernal Legion basically allows him to pick up a lot of the kills, which is better because, one, if he's the one that gets the kill, it's 100% guarantee we get another weapon out of it, and two, it's a higher level weapon. It has more life, it survives longer, and it does more damage. One thing about generating weapons, basically you start on a map or whatever, you're just popping these flasks, to get a lot of these minions going. I'd recommend whenever you're just trying to get as much minions as possible, find like a corner or nook, because the worms, they can't shoot out this way, and the Guardian can't go stand over there. If I'm standing out in the middle of the open like this and I drop a worm, the Guardian can be standing over here, and worms can go this way, and therefore he doesn't get the kill, which doesn't guarantee the weapon. If you go in a nook like this, it's much more of a guarantee that we create weapons because he gets a lot of those kills. Okay, next up for gems and links, we have Scorching Ray. This is just to apply fire exposure. Power Siphon, I basically was like, I have this unset ring, I'm too lazy to get a different ring. Power Siphon does culling, sure, whatever, I'll throw it in there. I have not used it once. Basically, just make your resistances or get more life. Basically, save yourself some time. Don't get a second unset ring. It's not worth it. Next up, I'm going to mention is I have a Vigilant Strike, Faster Attacks, Ancestral Call setup. This is basically so that I can get Fortify. I use the Vigil Jewel, so whenever I hit with Fortify, it ends up having like a 30-second duration because of all the increased Fortify duration on Vigilant Strike. This allows me to give Fortify to my minions and myself for pretty much permanent uptime. Very easy. It's just like I'm running around, I weapon swap to give my minions the Frenzy and power charges, and then I hit with Vigilant Strike, and boom, I swap back, And I only have to do that every 30 seconds or so. I have to do a weapon swap every 10 seconds or so, but that's as easy as just doing this. That's the weapon swap there. That's a, oh look, we have power frenzy charges. Now let's look at the I'm going to start off by going over the Ascendancy. We chose a Cyan for the sole purpose of having passive points, generating flasks, and having my offerings affect me. Honestly, it's pretty pathetic. More or less, I only benefit from 30 minion damage, my offerings affecting me as well at 75% effectiveness, and generating flash charges. And some passive points. That's literally all I get from this Ascendancy. The sole reason I did it was because of the Pathfinder nodes. I can't make an animated Guardian build with Chains of Command without the Pathfinder nodes. So my only choices are Pathfinder and Ascendance, and it's kind of sad. Ascendancy needs a rework, for Scion at least. After that, it is pretty much just grabbing life and a lot of the mini nodes around the tree, along with some stuff like Skill Effect Duration, Elemental Equilibrium, Wicked Ward. We also grab Necromantic Aegis. Some other important nodes here are this 4% reduced mana node. In order to have all of our auras running and still be able to cast things, we need this. Otherwise, we're at 100% use of mana. So more or less, you can't add in Aspect of the Avian or Flesh and Stone until you get this node here. That's the gist of it. I guess for leveling, I would describe the leveling process as you start out going here. You initially go straight over to minion damage, minion stuff here, you go to this Templar area and this Witch area right here, and then you move up, grab minion life down here, additional curse and minion damage here. Then lastly, you're going over here. I grabbed these nodes much earlier than this. This is the last stuff I ended up grabbing when I was leveling here. Actually prioritize Grave Intentions a little bit, but these 7, 8 nodes here are like the last ones you'll get, or at least the last ones I'd recommend getting. That's the gist of it. When you're leveling, just level as a zombie skeleton character. You can't equip this item until you're level 70, so don't even try to make an animated leveling build. It doesn't work. Except for maybe in the new patch it will, with Bladefall and the new mechanics, but we'll kind of see where that stuff lies. I'm a little bit worried it's not going to actually be that good, because if I say in this trailer, some people said, oh, it looks like it's only limited to 20 or 10 or something. They've been throwing out numbers. If it is limited to a small portion, it's going to be probably a dead skill, because it's going to feel like Skeletons did back when you could only summon one at a time, and on top of that, it's going to be an additional skill class. So not only can I summon them one at a time, but I also have to cast Bladefall first, which a whole bunch of sucky quality of life. I mean, animated weapons as is has horrible quality of life, but if they cut the ability for it to do a lot of damage by having 50 of those bad boys on the field and limit it to 10, I don't know. It's going to be questionable. We'll see where that lies. I may start with it as League Start. I may not. I may end up going for Caustic Arrow. That's the gist of the character. I hope you guys like this sort of demo and description of it. Actually, I forget if I went over this yet or not, but side note, don't use Griffin on your secondary. It's kind of a slow hit speed for your Vigilant Strike. Grab like a Bright Beak or something, so that way you're not stuck in a long, slow animation for hitting. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed the build. I'm also going to leave you with a video of me fighting the rest of the fight with Elder and the Shaper fight, just so you can see what it looks like in those boss fights. The recording on the Shaper fight was super glitchy. OBS was giving me a hard time yesterday when I was recording all this footage, so I apologize for all kind of the buggy, glitchy footage. More or less, I learned a lesson that day, which is don't use OBS recorder and stream at the same time because they glitch out. So, anyways, you guys have a good one.
Quickly!
A lot more wait time and less ads.
I see you, little one. Run along.
Should have picked up some of those ads.
Your recklessness will not go unpunished. This is your final warning. You force my hand again, little man. Silent temple. This is my world, and you shall obey my order.
They're coming through. He's recovering. We need to find a way back quickly.
Forgot about these mid-ad phases. This helps, I guess.
Behold the face of your unfaithful.
Let me help you.
The horror of the stop. Monster destroyed. Out to chaos.
Stop killing yourselves, you stupid weapons. My anime weapons are psychos, man. They're dancing in the death storm, trying to die.
Find a way back.
Memories are mine. I cannot lose them.
They lied to you, Father. I'm not remembering.
Save the future. The past must be sacrificed.
Buy me some time.
From the gods. Out to the chaos.
To me, exile. Quickly.
Seriously? Oops. Don't die, you
Gaze the abyss.
not like this. Alright. Easy game.
Irrelevant.
Okay.
Shut up and sit down.